Good morning, everyone. We're just going to start in about 2 minutes, wait for a few more people to get on, and then we'll get started. So, start in about 2 minutes. All right. Just want to make sure that you can hear. Okay. Um, thank you all for joining us today. Rabbi Shneor won't be coming on today. I'll be giving the class, and I really hope you all enjoy. We have something really nice prepared for you. So, this week's Torah portion is Parshas Korach. Now, Parshas Korach is the Torah portion which perhaps tests Moses' character in a way that no other test can ever do it. And that is obviously a test in your leadership. Now, in our lifetime, we have lived through many uprisings, rebellions, people trying to pull off a coup. I'm pretty sure there was one just recently, the last week, there was a country in, I believe it's Central America, that a military general try to pull off a coup and he failed, but he got pretty close. In Russia last year, you had the Wagner group try to pull off a coup and he failed. And eventually we all know what happened to him. And this is the first time that Moses is being challenged in such a way that someone wants to take away his leadership position. And I want to get into it. If you want to turn on your screens, get involved, ask questions, feel free. And if we want to go a little deeper, I'm happy to share my screen so we can actually learn some of the text inside if those of you are interested. But then you'll need to be on your screen. If not, we could keep it off the screen. So the story starts off with Korach, Korach, the son of Zohar, gathering people against Moses. And they confronted Moses together. And I'm just going to read the actual verse of the beginning of the Torah portion. They confronted Moses together with 250 men from the children of Israel. They were they were the leaders of the congregation, representatives of the assembly, men of repute. So these people weren't simple people. The people who stood up to Moses were people who were known in the community. They were people with a name behind them. And there were people that you wouldn't want to start up with. And they decide that, it's time to stand up to Moses. And this is what they tell Moses. Okay. They assemble against Moses and Aaron, and they said to them, "You take too much upon yourself, for the entire congregation are all holy, and the Lord is in their midst. So why do you raise yourself above the Lord's assembly?" And Moses hears this and he falls on his face. What's happening here? Korach at Mount Sinai heard the following words from God. God says, "You're going to be a nation of priests." This is what God told the Jewish people on Mount Sinai. And then Korach says, push comes to shove, and the Jewish people are in the desert. And now we're going to be in the desert for another 40 years. And who's the leader of the Jewish people? Who's running the show? We got two people, two brothers. They took everything for themselves. You got Moses. He is the leader. He's like the king. He's the prophet. He sets the rules. He sets the tone. And you got Aaron, who is the priest. You want to offer a sacrifice, you want to get close to God, you got to go to Aaron. And he's like, I don't understand. We are all holy. These are very important words to remember, right? It's not that Korach said, I want to be the holy one. I want to be the one to be the high priest. He is trying to gather the people around a common cause, and which is two brothers took all the power for themselves. And we see this theme of someone getting up and saying, "We are all holy, we are all equal." This happens so many times in our history, right? Just communism, socialism, so many revolutions start with the cry from a leader, we should all have power, we should all be equal. And when it actually happens, not everyone's equal. Some people are equal, but some people aren't equal. Some people are a little less than equal. Some people have a little less. And this is this is what happens in this week's Torah portion. Korach, Korach calls out, and I'm going to read the words again. You take too much upon yourselves, for the entire congregation are all holy, and the Lord is in your midst. So why do you raise yourself above the Lord's assembly? In other words, he was saying that every single Jew deserves to be a leader, right? Every single Jew is equal. So if every single Jew is equal, then why are two people leading everyone? We should all be able to be the prophet. We should all be able to be the high priest. But as he's crying out to the Jewish people and trying to gain a commotion around Moses to bring Moses down, ultimately it's only him with 250 people who are actually ready to take that step to become the new leader. And this is what Moses responds. Moses' response is just something that is very fitting for Moses to say, is that I didn't choose this. And we know this if we know the Torah. If you read through the Torah, you'll see there are multiple times which Moses says, I have enough. I don't want to be the leader. The first time that happened is at the burning bush. God tells Moses it's time to go rescue the Jewish people. And what does Moses say? I'm sure there's a better messenger out there than me. And then the next time at the burning bush, God tells Moses, I want you to go down to Egypt. And Moses responds, I have a stutter. And then the last time that God and Moses speak at the burning bush, God commands Moses again, and this was the fourth time, to go to Egypt to save the Jewish people. And what's Moses' response is Shlach Nabi Atishlach, send the messenger who is going to be the ultimate redeemer of the Jewish people. Moses saw with his prophecy that he's not going to be the one to bring the Jewish people to the ultimate redemption, not only out of Egypt, but away from all their oppressors. In other words, the time of Messiah. And Moses says, what's the point of me of me going to Egypt and sending me to Egypt to save the Jewish people when the Jews are going to fall back into slavery, back into oppression, maybe not by the Egyptians, but eventually by another nation, which was the Babylonians and then the Romans. And we see this play out countless times throughout the Torah, this theme that Moses is like, I don't want this. I could have lived a great life to myself, learn Torah, study, be on my own. But yet I understood that this is my mission and it's God calling me on this mission. But Moses never asked to be the leader. So when Korach gathers up against Moses, what is Moses' response? Is let's let God decide who the leader is supposed to be. You all want to be the leaders, you're all holy. I don't disagree with that. But I don't choose this. This is God's decision. And this is what they decide to do. And this is what plays out. We know that the high priest, right? The high priest is the one that sacrifices the ketores. The ketores is the spices that sacrifice on the inner altar, the golden altar that was in the tabernacle. So Moses tells Korach, says, how about we're all you and your 250 people, the prominent men of the assembly, who all want to be the high priest. Why don't you all gather your staffs, bring the sacrifice of the Ketoret, and you'll see and Aaron, my brother, will also bring the sacrifice, and we'll see which staff does God uh, put his fire down on, and that's the person that God chooses. Let God choose. Why do we have to argue it out? Let's see who God wants to be the high priest. And this is what happens. And as this play is about to take place and everyone's about to sacrifice the ketoret, the spices, Moses tries his best to end this rebellion and end this standing up to leadership in a peaceful manner. And two of the men who were part of this rebellion against Moses were Dasan and Aviram. Now, Dasan and Aviram, this is not their first rodeo against Moses. This is their third time starting up against Moses. The first was in Egypt when when Moses told the Jew hitting another Jew, why do you hit your fellow? Evil man, why do you hit your fellow? It says that these two people were Dasan and Aviram, and they're the ones who went and told Pharaoh that Moses killed an Egyptian. So this is the first time that they stood up to Moses' leadership. The second time is when the Jews were commanded to eat the manna, and they were told that on the Sabbath, you won't find any manna outside. And Dasan and Aviram decided that on the Sabbath, they should go out and look for some manna. Although they were supposed to collect the double portion on Friday, they decided not to listen to Moses. And now, the third time, Dasan and Aviram, they're part of this crew of 250 people with Korach trying to take away the leadership of Moses. So this is what Dasan and Aviram respond when Moses asks them, please come over, let's have a civil discussion, and we'll figure it out. This is, I'm going to read the actual verse. This is the last verse of the first Aliyah, and the first verse of the second Aliyah is verse 13. If you have a Chumash, it's verse 13 of chapter 16. Is not enough that you have brought us out of the land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the desert, that you should also exercise authority over us? So, in other words, they're saying that the land of milk and honey is the land of Egypt, and you, Moses, forced all the Jews out of the land of Egypt. And now, if you remember last week's Torah portion, the Jews were punished. They're going to have to stay in the land in the desert for 40 years. So now we're all going to die in the desert. So you took us out of the land of milk and honey, for us to all die in the desert. Continuing with verse 14. You have not even brought us to the land flowing with milk and honey, nor have you given us an inheritance of fields and vineyards. Even if you gouge out the eyes of those men, we will not go up. Wow. Very powerful words from Dasan and Aviram. They're not willing to talk. They're not willing to listen. And Moses was extremely distressed by these comments. And here is when Moses continues to tell Korach and these 250 people to once again take their staff, put the spices on, and we'll see the heavenly fire. Does it reside on the staff of these 250 people or the staff of Korach, or does it come down on the staff of Aaron? And this is a way Moses is trying to convince these 250 people. This is a way for God to choose who should be the high priest. Again, the theme here is Korach is trying to appeal to the audience. Korach is trying to gather the entire nation. If you actually if you read, I don't know if any of you have a chumash in front of you, but I'm going to read to you one of the verses here regarding the story. Is Korach assembled all the congregation against them at the entrance of the tent of meeting. So now, again, so they were supposed to bring the staff with the spices, right? And sacrifice and bring a sacrifice of spices to God. Now, when Korach comes with his staff, he decides he's going to gather the entire congregation. So we don't know if that means the entire Jewish people, but we know it definitely means more than the 250 people. Korach is trying to make a commotion, and his plea to the Jewish people is, I am not here for myself. I'm here for the Jewish people as a whole. Why do we need a leader like Moses? We are holy enough that we should all be leaders. Kulam Kedoshim. Everyone is holy. It's not fair that Moses and his brother comes and take all the leadership position. So now that Korach agrees to the challenge of Moses, that it's not human beings who are going to decide who the leader is, it's God, as he comes with the challenge. In other words, to bring a offering of spices and to see who God is going to bring down his fire on their offering. Korach once again, to add fuel to the fire, gathers everyone, makes a huge assembly to try once to throw off Moses from his leadership position. Now, here is where we're going to need to stay focused on the story to really understand the details of the story and the back and forth. And we will see that even as Moses is being challenged in a way that he's never been, he still loves and is compassionate and cares about the Jewish people, even the people who are trying to pull him down. And we see this with the next verse, right? So the last verse we read was that as Korach is bringing his staff with the spices, right, his offering of spices to see who should be the high priest, he gathers everyone. He makes a huge assembly, a commotion. Everyone has to know that we are challenging Moses' leadership. Now, the Lord speaks to Moses and Aaron saying, God sees this commotion. And although God could have came down on Aaron's offering, the fire on Aaron's offering, and everyone would know that Aaron is the high priest. But we see here that Korach's intentions are, even though that he knew that he wouldn't be the high priest, he was still trying to get the Jewish people against Moses and Aaron. How do I know that? There's one thing if he said, look, it's not fair that two brothers take all the leadership positions. We should we should split the leadership positions amongst more Jews, right? We should be a little more equal, more representation, right? It's the trend these days amongst some people is to think that you need to have equal representation for every single type of race, gender, and human being that exists. This is a good argument that you can have or not. And this is essentially what's happening in this week's Torah portion. Korach is saying we should all be leaders, we should all be equals, and therefore we should be equally represented by, to serve God. And to do that, he gathers everyone, he creates this commotion. And here is what God tells Moses as Korach with the 250 people bring their spice offering to the tabernacle. And we all know what's going to happen. God is going to come down on the offering of Aaron. But yet, Korach, knowing that, still creates a commotion because he wants to create chaos and challenge Moses to the end. Sorry. And this is what God tells Moses: disassociate yourself from the congregation, and I will consume them in an instant. So, what is God saying? That I have enough of the Jewish people. Imagine you're residing in the desert for 40 years. Now it's just in the beginning, and there's a huge commotion going on, maybe a leadership change. Everyone wants to know what's happening. Every time there's discomfort in a country or there's turmoil in a country, everyone gathers in the public square. Do you think everyone gathering in the public square agree with the new change? There's probably some yes, some not. But a lot of people they're curious. They want to know what's happening in their country. It's going to be affecting their life. They go to the streets. They want to see what's happening. So too now. Moses is being challenged, so he gathers everyone to the tabernacle, to the town square. Like, look what we're doing. We may be able to throw Moses and Aaron off of their leadership positions. And God sees this and says, I'll just kill them in an instant. And this is what Moses and Aaron respond. They fell on their faces and said, Oh God, the God of the spirit of the flesh, if one man sins, shall he be angry with the whole congregation? So what does it mean if one man sins? Here we have the commentary Rashi, who explains the following. God, Kel Haruchos. What does Kel Haruchos means? God of the spirit of all flesh. If one man shall sin, you shall be what? Shall you be angry with the whole congregation? So Rashi explains it the following. God, you know what people are thinking. Your ways are different than the ways of a human being. Melech basar v'dam shesarcha alav mixas medina, a human being who is a king, and part of the country has turned against him. Ein yodea miachota. He doesn't know who's the one who is at fault. For example, he knows that people are trying to throw him off, to throw him over. People are trying to revolutionize against this throne. Because he's a human being, he can't read people's thoughts. So therefore, when this king gets angry that people are trying to commit a coup and throw him off from power, he gets revenge on everyone, even those who are innocent, right? Even those who do want him in power. Because how should the king know if one man wants to throw him from power or one man wants to keep him in power? But you are, everything is revealed to you. You know everyone's thoughts and you know who's the sinner. So essentially, what Moses is saying is yes, Korach managed to gather everyone. But perhaps the reason how he managed to gather everyone is because he's creating this commotion. And imagine life in the desert. It was quite interesting, right? You can imagine there was not much going on besides learning Torah, studying. There was no cooking, there's no drinking, right? They had manna and fresh water. There was not much going on in the desert besides studying Torah. So now there's this whole commotion and people gather around. Moses is like, are you going to kill everyone who gathered here? Maybe some people were just here out of curiosity, right? Not everyone is here. And you know everyone's thoughts. So you should punish the people who are going against you, who want to throw us down. Now, I have a few questions on this commentary from Rashi. The first question is a proper king, okay? A proper king. If right, what did Rashi say? You are the God, the spirit of all flesh. You if one man sins, shall you be angry with the whole congregation? And Rashi explains, so what does it mean? You're not like a human being. A human being doesn't know who's trying to throw him off. But you know everyone's thoughts. So Rashi asked the following question. A proper king who is going to judge people with innocence, with proper rule of law, is going to have to investigate. He's not just going to go on a rampage and start killing people because he feels like that there are some amongst him that wants to throw him away from power. He's going to investigate who it is and is going to punish the people who are trying to throw him off, right? You're not just going to go and kill everyone. You're going to kill those who need to, you're going to punish those who need to be punished. But it seems like that Rashi is comparing God to a mad king, that when 5, 10 people want to throw him off from power, he decides to punish his entire nation. How does Rashi even try to use this comparison? And the second question is, this is not the first time in the Torah that we have someone asking God, you are the spirit of all flesh. If one man sins, shall you be angry with the whole congregation? Where do we have a similar question to God? Abraham was told that Sodom and Gomorrah are going to be turned over and all their inhabitants will be killed. And what does Abraham tell God? There must be some good people in Sodom. That and how can you kill a righteous man with an evil man? And Rashi doesn't come over there and explain, well, Abraham was telling God, a regular human being can't tell a difference between a righteous man and an evil man when there's a coup because he just feels threatened and decides to punish everyone. But you know what people are thinking, and you should punish the ones who are thinking against you. Rashi doesn't go into that in that Torah portion. Only over here, when it comes to Moses asking God, if one man sins, how can you be angry with everyone? Does Rashi compare it to Rashi give the explanation that you are different than a human being. A human being can't read people's thoughts. You can, and therefore you shouldn't punish everyone. These are the two questions. Now, I want to highlight some of the words of this verse because this verse is very powerful, and I'm going to get into it in a few minutes. And I think this is an important verse that if that we there's many lessons we can learn from this. One of the other words that Moses tells God to not kill the entire congregation is a ish echad yachteh. If one man sin, shall you be angry with the whole congregation? What does it mean, one man sin? This is what the commentaries tell us. One man is the sinner, right? We both, God, Moses is telling God, one man is the sinner, but you get angry on everyone who congregated outside that one man. And what does God respond? Yes, you are right. I know who sinned. I know who didn't sin. How do we know that God responded to this? If we continue reading the story, it's Moses. God tells Moses the following: Speak to the people of Israel, and they should withdraw from the dwelling of Korach, Datam, and Aviram, and the 250 people, and everyone should stand back. And Moses tells the Jewish people, you should know that I am not doing this. This is the Lord that sent me to do this punishment. And what was the punishment to these 250 people together with Korach and Dasan and Aviram? Moses says, if God wanted, he can create a creation like the earth, and it can open its mouth and swallow all that is there and all their descendants, and you will know that these men that were swallowed provoked the name of God. And as soon as Moses finished speaking, the earth listened to Moses, and the earth opened up and swallowed these 250 people. So essentially, we see that Moses' plea with God not to punish everyone, just to punish who is meant to be punished. We see that God, in a sense, told Moses, you're right. I know who deserves to be punished. I know who not to be punished. Now go out to the Jewish people, tell them to separate from those who are challenging you from the 250 people, and they're all going to be swallowed to death. We see here a interesting point that I want to make. The first is that there were 250 people, and Dasan and Aviram, together with Korach, who stood up against Moses. But if you read the verses, you actually see that in Moses' eye, there was one culprit over here. What does Moses tell God? If one man sins. Now, Moses is under the impression that this one man, Korach, is truly the only one that should be punished. And the way Moses comes to this conclusion is by the following. You see, in the Jewish people in the desert had an interesting way the way they resided. The tabernacle was in the center. In the north, you had Moses and Aaron's tents. The north of the tabernacle, you have Moses and Aaron's tents. And you had three tribes, the tribe of Judah, Zebulun, and Issachar. Three tribes that resided near Moses. On the east of the tabernacle, you had the families of Kahat, the Levite family of Kahat, which includes Korach. And then you had three tribes that resided near them, which one of those tribes were Reuven. These 250 men were all from the tribe of Reuven. And Moses' opinion, the way he saw the story, and this really shows Moses' humility, is that Korach was jealous that Moses and Aaron took the leadership position. But he knew that he's going to come alone. No one will listen to him. So every single night, in the desert, there's not much going on. And who does he talk to about his frustrations? Who does he vent to? His neighbors. Who are his neighbors? The tribe of Reuven resided near the tent of Korach. So when Korach feels like he amassed enough important people to stand up against Moses, that's when he goes to Moses. So up until the end, Moses' opinion is that only Korach should be punished. Because Ish Echad Yechta, there's only one man who sinned. And that shows that Moses' humility, even though 250 people are standing up against him, in his eyes, it's all Korach. If Korach falls, they will all fall. And how do I know it's just Korach? Because Korach was the leader, and Korach was their neighbor. And every single night they would hack and they would vent and they would yent. Eventually, Korach convinced him to stand up against Moses. But in truth, it's all Korach's mastermind. You actually see this play out so many times in history. We could take so many leaders who claimed to be the leader of the people. When it comes out, they're not only the leader for the people, they were the leader for themselves and the few people who backed them in the beginning. And even for those people, they're not their leader, they're more the dictator of the people. Take Lenin, for an example. Lenin, for many years, tried to gain power, try to get political power. Eventually, when his time came, he took power and he put him and all his communist friends who were hiding in Switzerland for many years, they all became the leaders of the Communist Party of Russia. Same with Hitler. Hitler did the same. So many of our worst leaders in history, the most subhuman human beings who killed and murdered millions of people, all started the way Korach started. One man with a crazy idea to challenge what some people in the US call the patriarchy or a hierarchy. But in truth is, we have a democratic system, thank God. And they decide they want to challenge the system, challenge what's there. Why? For what reason. And they could wait years, and many of them never succeed. But the few that did succeed were charismatic leaders, right? Not to say they were good people, but they were able to rally the troops and rally human beings to follow them. They, like Korach, they claim that they're there for the people, but in truth, they just come with their 250 close followers who are ready to stand up with them, and they take up all the leadership positions. And Moses sees this, and Moses knows this, right? And therefore, Moses, in his mind, he only wants to take down Korach, right? He doesn't need to take down all the bad people who are with Korach. He feels like they would fall and they would foil him. They don't have the same power that Korach has. And that's what Korach tries to do. And you actually see this with the way Rashi compares him to a king, right? One of our questions was, why doesn't Rashi compare him to a just king? And you see in Moses' eyes and the way Moses argued with God is that a lot of the kingdom may have turned against you, right? A lot of the kingdom, it could be more and more people would, in theory, follow Korach. And it's not that Moses is trying to compare God to a mad king. He's trying to compare God to a king who it may seem like he lost control of the people. Many times when someone loses control over the people, you may think, it's lost. It's a coup. It's done. And that's it. Give up. Flee. But Moses is trying to tell God, you're different than a regular king. A regular king in this situation, seeing so many people gather around, so many people interested in this revolution, they would feel like that they lost control of the people, that they lost the respect and the dignity that they deserve for being their king. But Moses tells God, you are different. You know people's thoughts. What does it mean you know people's thoughts? You know that even though these people come and say that they want everything to be equal, they also have a leader. They also have one single leader. Who is that single leader? Korach. And all it would really take to take these people down is just Korach. Just take down Korach. And God's response to this is, in a sense, Moses, you're right. In a sense, Moses, there's really one person who, in your eyes, may seem like sin. But God's response is, I know, and I will let you know, Moses, who truly sinned and who didn't. And what does that mean? Yes, it may seem like that just Korach is the culprit, and if you kill Korach, everything would fall. But God tells Moses, the 250 people and Dasan and Aviram who gathered together with Korach, they too deserve to be punished and fall. I'll compare it to, let's take the Nazis. God, Hitler dies in 1945. The Nazis fall after Hitler dies. Do you say that the people who surrounded Hitler, were they also people who deserve to die? Of course. Now that's an extreme case. That's an extreme case. These people were evil animals, subhuman, racist. But take even someone like Lenin, right, who may not seem as bad as Hitler, even though he somewhat caused for maybe just as many deaths, maybe not to a specific race, but definitely to his people. Or Mao, take Mao. Yes, it's one person who's on top, but he has this close circle. God tells Moses, yes, it's one person on top, Korach, who's the leader of this rebellion. But they have their close circle, and their close circle is ready to carry out anything the leader would want, even if it's against morality, just dignifying human beings. Take someone like Lenin. Yes, he was the leader of the Communist Party, but you think he was able to do all the evils at first without his close circle? Of course not. And look what happened. When he got sick and died, who took over? Stalin, who was part of his inner circle. And look what he did. So Moses thinks that you just need to get rid of Korach. And God responds is, I know who sinned. I know who didn't sin. And therefore he punishes not only Korach, but he punishes the entire 250 people who tried to stand up. Why? Because they're the inner circle of Korach. They're the people who planned this out. God doesn't punish all those who congregated, who thought it was a good idea, or didn't think it was a good idea. God just punished those who were part of that inner tight circle of Korach, who thought that we should all be leaders and who were willing to take a stance. And even though it seems like Korach was the leader of these 250 people, but they too are considered sinners and they too are punished. I'm just going to end off with to show one lesson that we just mentioned. You see, Korach was the leader, right? But at one point in the beginning of the story, Moses sends a messenger to Dasan and Aviram, not to the leader, Dasan and Aviram, and he says, Dasan and Aviram, come, let's chat, let's talk, let's see if we can figure this out. And what do they say? It is not enough. This is the response. And we read this earlier. I'm just going to read it again. The response of Dasan and Aviram say, we will come and meet you. It is not enough that you have brought us out of the land of flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the desert, that you should also exercise authority over us. You have not even brought us to the land flowing with milk and honey, nor have you given us an inheritance of fields and vineyards. Even if you gouge out the eyes of those men, we will not go up. What clearer proof that Dasan and Aviram are not willing to negotiate or even talk, who are part of the sin, and they should be punished? Right here, the verse tells us so clearly. Moses calls out not only to Korach, but Moses calls out to Dasan and Aviram, come, let's have a conversation. And Dasan and Aviram say, absolutely not. We're not coming to talk to you. And yet, At the end of the story, when God says, I want to punish everyone, who does Moses think should be punished? Just that one person, Korach, the main leader. But wait a second. In the same chapter, we see that Dathan and Aviram are also criticizing Moses, are also standing up against Moses. But here we see Moses' humility, that even though someone could say such terrible nonsense about you, he still looked at Dathan and Aviram with a positive outlook. Why? Because even after those words, Moses thought that maybe they're saying it only because they were influenced by Korach. They say it so clearly in the verse, but yet Moses doesn't ask for them to be killed. And this teaches us how much more so sometimes we think someone said something, we're convinced they said something, we feel hurt, we feel upset, we don't want to talk to them anymore. Let's all learn from Moses that even someone could say such terrible words to you. Maybe someone else convinced them to say those words. Maybe it's not their words, it's someone else's words, and to judge everyone favorably. I want to thank you all for joining us. It was a beautiful class today. It's a beautiful parsha. A lot of lessons can be learned. And I hope you all enjoyed and wishing you a blessed rest of your week and hope to see you all soon. All the best.